with more information on what we can expect from the stress tests. I'm joined by Nomura's chief economist, Peter Westaway. Peter, thanks very much for talking to us about this. I was interested to see that Nomura's actually done its own stress tests. How have the banks fared in those overall?
Well, my colleagues in banking equity have done their own experiments. Of course, they can't do it in exactly the same way because the whole point of these stress tests is people outside don't have all the available information. So they've made some probably more pessimistic assumptions than are likely to be made in the official stress test. And they've come up with a number of around 75 billion, which I think is probably quite a bit larger than the headline number we're going to get on Friday. I think we're more likely to see a number like 30 billion there.
Now, you say that, the tests you've come up with are more pessimistic. Do you think that the ones that are going to be done are actually rigorous enough, or have they been engineered, as there's been some criticism that they have, in order to make sure that very few banks actually fail the test?
I mean, they're quite rigorous in one respect, in the sense that the macro scenario talks about a 3% fall in GDP, which is quite severe. I mean, I think where most of the criticism has been is on the way they treat sovereign debt, and I think there's a tricky issue here because policymakers aren't going to want to oversee a stress test where they're making assumptions that basically some of these periphery countries actually default on their debt when they've been spending all of their time saying this can't possibly happen. Yeah. So I think they're trying to steer this middle ground.
The problem about that is, of course, that it doesn't give us a kind of worst-case scenario, which really is what stress tests are supposed to be about, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, it's a sort of a quite bad case scenario, but not the very worst. I guess what policymakers would say is that worst-case scenario, we're not going to allow it to happen because of the stability funds that's been set up. That's what they're trying to do to prevent these defaults from happening. But
now, is it going to actually give the banks more credibility? Is it going to give them the kind of transparency and the investors the confidence that we were told at the very beginning were the reasons for these stress tests?
I'm not sure it's going to do in the very short run. Because I think so much of the results have already been flagged. People aren't expecting there to be large-scale failures or large-scale capital raising being prompted. But let's not forget the very existence of these stress tests has already started to be a catalyst for some of the capital raising, both by governments and potentially from the private sector. And I think in the longer run, this transparency has to be a good thing.
Indeed, we've already heard that these tests are going to be done perhaps every year, that there are going to be more of them. Is this the move that we were expecting to see towards a lot more transparency?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see exactly how much transparency there is, but I think any move that opens up the books and allows people outside to make their own calculations and to force banks into making the right decisions more quickly has to be a good thing, because it's all about lack of information. That's what the real problem is that's preventing banks from lending to each other. So anything that frees that up is a good thing.
Peter, just briefly, the banks that fail, what will happen to them?
Well, they can either be forced. I mean, in the case of the savings banks, the public sector banks, that's going to likely to mean they're going to have to draw on the special funds that have been set up that you were just talking about. It might require them to go to the private sector markets, although in some cases some of these banks may just have to be taken over by others. I think there's a range of outcomes.
Peter, thank you very much indeed.